Thank you very much for taking the time to take a look at this video. At this point in time, we'll assume that you have now installed the connector. There are three things that do need to be installed. That is what we call the AD connector or the PCB connector. This is shown in our last video. Secondly, you have to have either installed what they call PCB Services or the SolidWorks PCB Services if you do not have an Altium Vault. Either way, you'll have to be able to log into either one of these. And then lastly, you'll need to have your version of SolidWorks CAD. And again, just to remind you, this will work best if all of the connector services and CAD programs are of the same version. And in this case, we will be using Altium Designer 18. The connector was designed for 18, or at least this version of it. We're using SolidWorks Services, which was for version 2018, and for SolidWorks CAD 2018 as well. So with that, let's get started here. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do over here is I'm actually going to log into the SolidWorks PCB Services, and that is done on the right top hand corner of the screen. So I'm going to go over here to the top, and I'm going to click on this little icon that says Sign In. So here I'm going to sign in. You'll notice that it is http://localhost:9780. This is the SolidWorks PCB Services address. The username here is just going to be admin. I'm going to put in my password over here, and then I'm going to continue. I don't normally automatically allow it to sign in after start, since not all the projects that work on in Altium Designer are going to necessarily use this feature. And so sometimes it just saves a little bit of time when we're just initializing and getting into Altium Designer. So that's what I'm going to do here. Feel free to store the session credentials if you wish to do so. And I'm going to click on Sign In. Now that we have signed in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a project that has not been placed into SolidWorks PCB Services and one that has not been used in Subversion. So I'm going to go here to my file, open, and I will navigate over to a project that is ready to go over here at this point in time. Now that we have opened up the prjpcb file over here, we need to turn it into a managed project. So in order for us to do that, we're going to right click on the prjpcb file, and we're going to select Convert to Managed Projects. We're going to click on that here. Also going to extend down the advanced because we want to take a look at everything we've got here. First and foremost, the project name. This will be the name of the project that's going to reside in the SolidWorks PCB in the server. And of course, if you're using Altium Vault, it will also show this as well. This allows you to retrieve it at a later point in time if you're going to use this managed project again. The description here is, again, something you can change. And by the way, for the project name here, you can change that as well. It just simply took the prefix of the prjpcb file name here. I'm perfectly fine with that. And so that's what we'll let it stand as being. Here is your description. If you wish to add more, you can do that as well. So now you can see that's going to ask for the default repository. So let's take a look over here. There's really not a whole lot that you can really change here unless you happen to have both Vault and SolidWorks PCB Services. That's really just not going to happen, given that really the Vault and SolidWorks PCB Services really don't reside very well on the same machine. You really want to have one or the other. So we're just going to go with the default repository. Here is the path for that. There's nothing you need to change at this point in time. This is the name that it's going to be giving it. Notice that the working copy is the exact same location where this started out as. So I don't need to necessarily create a checkout area afterwards. It is simply going to take the existing directory that I have, and it's going to basically convert it into a checkout directory. So there is a lot of flavor of SVN involved in this as well, though it is not just strictly SVN. And the server folder, this is the name that it's going to use, because within the server folder, again, it needs to have some project directory structure, and it's going to just use the project name for that. So really, in essence, there's not a whole lot of things that I need to change here. I'm perfectly content with that, and I'm going to press OK. Since we are putting this into version control, it is prompting us here to make sure that the files of the project are going to be put into version control. So we are going to commit this. Once it is complete here, you will see the check marks on the right side of the projects panel. This indicates that these files have been checked in. This is now considered to be a managed project. I'm now going to open up the rangefinder.prjpcb file, and let's push the information that we've got over here over to SolidWorks CAD. So we do have our file up over here. One of the things I am going to do, there's a few changes I'm going to make. This is a completed project at this point in time, and it has been routed. So let's do a couple of things to this project so that it will work a little bit better going back and forth. All right, so how do we actually get this pushed on over to SolidWorks CAD? I need to bring up my panel that we showed in the last video, and that is the SolidWorks PCB Connector. So let's bring that up at this point. And what I want to do now is I want to push this into the SolidWorks PCB Services. So I'm going to click on this to push it, and so I'll say initial push. So you do want to put some information over here that will be useful, because whatever you put into this commentary, that's exactly what you're going to see on the SolidWorks CAD side. So I am now going to post this here, and let's bring this up and hopefully you can see it. There we go. So now we're pushing this into the SolidWorks PCB Services. So you got to remember that both Altium Designer and SolidWorks have their native formats. They are not compatible directly with each other. So by pushing these into the services, there is some translation that's going to go on that's going to allow these two tools to work really in their native format. So we're not dealing with step files here. We're actually dealing with their native formats, which is really, really useful. So this has now been pushed over. We can see the note here. Let's bring up SolidWorks CAD. Okay, so let's bring this up on over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, go ahead and pull the board from PCB Services. So let's click on that here. So you can see that we now have our selected project. So there was a project in there before. The one that we will do is the rangefinder single sheet, and that's fine. So I'll press OK at this point in time, and we'll let it build. It will prompt me for a place to save. So again, we're trying to work in the files that are native and local to SolidWorks CAD. We're not trying to do translations through steps. So now we do have our location. I'll press open, save here, and it will now continue along over here. Now initially when we're doing this, it may take a little bit longer because again, it is taking the information from SolidWorks PCB. It's translating into those things that are more native to SolidWorks CAD. In the future, it will have already saved that information off. So as you're pushing things to and from the SolidWorks PCB Services, it will go a little bit faster. But again, for the first time, it is having to build a few things, and that's why it's taking a few moments here for it to come together. As you can see on the screen, it is systematically pulling itself together, and voila, there is our board at this point. You'll also notice the panel on the right-hand side. So you can see that this is the panel that looks very, very similar to what we saw in Altium Designer 18. So what can we do to this thing? Well, what you can do in the 18 version is three things. You can basically rechange the shape of the board, add and change board holes, and you can move around components. And there is also the ability to place barriers as well. This gives you a lot of power to be able to collaborate between Altium Designer and SolidWorks CAD. So just to give an example over here, let's take this particular component and let's move it over. Let's say I don't like this where it's at and I want to move it. So now that I have moved it over here, I can actually push this back into the SolidWorks Services. So let's just say that I moved U1, and I'll just say post this at this point in time. So now you can see that it's pushing this back into the services. Let's go back over to Altium Designer 18, and I will actually get a notification here that says, hey, there's been a change over here that's been made. So it says moved one here. I want to view the changes. And when we click on view the changes, we can see each and every primitive that basically got moved, usually the components that got moved here, or if there was a board hole, or if there was a change in the board itself. One side note, since this is the first time I've done it since the installation, you may get a SolidWorks product activation. So make sure that you do allow it to continue over here. That just happens the first time you run a SolidWorks product. I'm going to press finish on that. So now that we're there, you can see that we're going to view the changes. How can we do it? We can actually do it in both the 2D mode and in the 3D mode. So if I click on the component, for example, you'll notice that it moves it down here. So you saw the ghost of it move all the way down. And if we want to do it in the 3D mode, we can certainly do that as well. So if I hit the 3 key, let's go on over. So you can see this here. There it is. If I like it, I can accept it. If I don't like it, I still have to click apply, meaning that I'm not going to accept this, but I recognize the fact that we need to sync back up with each other. In this case, I don't want to accept it because of the fact that the pads here are not being shown. Now, just to give you a little heads up, in 2019, those pads will be seen so the mechanical engineer can make wise and prudent decisions in regards to the placement of it. But obviously in this situation here, they moved it to a location that's going to interfere with other parts. This is not going to work for me. So I'm not going to accept it, but I am going to hit apply here. So you can see it now got rejected, and that's perfectly fine. Now I've got a discrepancy between what I've got with SolidWorks CAD and in Altium Designer. What I want to do is I want to get us back into sync with each other. So I'm going to go back into my SolidWorks PCB over here. I'm going to push this back in here. I'm going to put a note saying rejected, U1 move due to electrical collision. And I'm going to post this at this point in time. Again, this is pushing this over into the SolidWorks PCB server. Let's bring up our SolidWorks CAD again. So remember, this got moved over here. There's a new notification, so let's view the changes. And you can see that it's now saying, hey, U1. And of course, if I want to read this, obviously that's a good thing for me to do to understand why it got rejected. But in this case here, I can click on U1 and it's telling me where it's going to be proposed. So it's basically showing that this is going to move back to its original location. Because of the electrical collisions, I'm going to say accept, and that's perfectly fine. I'll click on accept here, and now both my layout and SolidWorks CAD are now in sync with each other. This is just kind of a brief introduction of the capabilities that you've got over here. Have at it. Thanks for taking the opportunity to look at this video. I hope that you found it useful, and you have a great day.